This conference will now be recorded.
All right. So in today's session, I don't plan to, let's say, go ahead cover a new topic. So it's been like, a good amount of time that we are with each other. So let's go ahead and do a quick revision of all the topics that we have done so far. Let's see what are all the areas that the interview questions really come from. And I would want this session to be more interactive. So I would want you all to ask me a lot of questions. I would also ask you a lot of questions on what kind of, let's say, scenarios the interviewer actually gives you. So that would be the primary focus on the session. So I'm not again planning to, let's say, stretch this out to 1 hour. It'll be around 40-45 minutes out there, wherein primarily we'll look at the resources, what we will be, let's say, covering for the interview topics and all these things. How do you read that? How do you prepare yourselves more for that, and etc. So this is the area that I am going to address. So any issues with this? Are we good with this? Any concerns here? All right. So just to give you an idea on what we've been doing, we started off with, let's say, tenants in Azure. We said what is an Azure tenant, and we also said under a tenant there are something called subscriptions. So the first question for you all guys is that, I'll say subscriptions. Anyone can take this. Anyone can answer this out. I'm not pointing out to anyone as such. So the first question is that, guys, is that can I have multiple free trial subscriptions under the same tenant? Yes, no, maybe.
No,
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 no.
exactly. You cannot have multiple free trial, but you can have multiple subscriptions which are not free trial. And
Yes.
until the point which are not free trial, I can go ahead and add multiple subscriptions out here. Again, why do you need multiple subscriptions under the same tenant? A better separation. You can have multi-subscriber model. You can have a better separation. You can have a better role assignment and all these things out. So we started out with tenant subscriptions, then we went into, let's say, something like a role assignment, RBAC, RBAC controls out here. Now, what are the broad classification of the roles, guys? What did we read on the broad classification of the role out here?
Owner, contributor, and reader.
Owner, contributor, and a reader. Now, let's say my counter cross question that there is that there is a person called A in your subscription for which who you have given something called a reader access. Can he go ahead and create a resource group?
No.
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 No, he shouldn't be able to
not a
create a
possible.
resource group. Not possible because he's just a reader. He will not be able to go ahead and create something called as resources in your subscription. In order for him to create resources in your subscription, you need to give him a higher access. Now, the other thing is that then what do you feel is the biggest difference between an owner and a contributor? Now, where they two, let's say, differ out in the permission set.
Owner
U-
can add people
User,
name.
Owner can edit everything like
user administration.
User
Owner can add.
administration. Mhm. Exactly. User administration. That's correct. Owner can do a user administration, which means that owner can go ahead and add other users. Owner has the capability to add other users. Contributor can't. Contributor, as a contributor, you cannot go and add people, but you can go and create resources, delete resources, everything an owner can do apart from user management. Apart from user management, the owner can go ahead and do pretty much everything. So the contributor can do pretty much everything that an owner can do out here. Yes, Narendra said owner is like an administrator. Yes, that's correct. Owner is like an administrator for your subscription out there. And we also talked about conflicting accesses, right? Meaning, let's say again, person A is a contributor on a resource group or contributor on a resource group called B, What you did is that later you went ahead and added this particular same person A as a reader on the same resource group called B. Now, what is the permission he has? Will he have a reader permission still? Oh, sorry, will he have a contributor permission still? Or will that permission change into a reader?
Change into reader.
Change into reader, okay. Anyone else?
I
Highest
think
permissions it will take actually.
Highest permission it will take, exactly. It would not
Contributor
change
it will
into
take.
yes, it will take a contributor. It will not convert into a reader. Azure RBACs will work in an additive mode. Meaning, if you look at the documentation out here, let's go quickly to the documentation and let's also look at that. It's to the documentations out here, and let's say this is RBACs conflicting permissions, and let's look at that. I mean, yeah, on rule-based access, and let's see multiple rule assignments, and this is what it's telling. So what happens if you have multiple rule assignments? And RBAC is always an additive model, so your effective permission is a sum of your rule assignments. So if you're a contributor plus a reader, what Azure will do, or what Azure now does, is that it now add contributor and the reader and tell you, okay, fine, you are a contributor on a particular resource out there. So this is the link, or this is the note that I want you all to read. Very, 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 let's say, favorite asked interview question out there. So I'll just go ahead and give this link to you all directly to that particular note. You kind of can go ahead and look at this one. So this is a very, very popular asked interview question on how about multiple role assignments out here. What do you think will happen if you have multiple role assignments which are conflicting with each other? Your answer should be that it is always an addition. Azure should always go ahead and do something called as an addition out here. That is what Azure would do when it comes with the role-based access controls. Now, these were the surface of Azure. These were the, let's say, the initial, days that we went ahead and said what is, let's say, the rule. I mean, what is, let's say, the subscription tenants and etc. Then we came down to something called resource groups, and we said how to create a resource group, how to tag a resource group, what exactly is a resource group, and etc. Again, resource group is nothing like, it's like a folder out here. You just need to have, or you just need to have a resource group to get started. Again, once one tenant can have multiple subscription, one subscription can have multiple resource groups, and each and every resource group can have their own unique RBACs assigned with each other. So you can go and do something like rule-based access control with a resource group out there. Is possible, is doable. You can do that. So resource group just like a folder out here, but then we went ahead into something called as storage accounts. And believe me, guys, if you have storage account in your profile, I mean, normally when you roll out your resumes in a couple of, let's say, days from now, you would have to, let's say, also talk about what are all the services that you are, let's say, that you have worked on. Now, you probably will talk about virtual machines, storage accounts, web applications, a lot of things out there, Azure Devops, a lot of things out there. And if you have something like storage account in your profile, this is one of the most asked interview question area, one of the most favorite topics, because a lot of organizations use this particular, let's say, service called as storage accounts in Azure. So let's look into this. Let's understand a couple of things out here. And I will ask a couple of questions. So let's again, try to, let's say, give answers to this and understand what is our knowledge, where do we stand, and where do we need to, let's say, correct ourselves and etc. So very firstly, naming convention of a storage account. Can I go ahead create a storage account of any name, or should I be following some kind of a rules?
Unique. Name should be unique.
Unique,
Unique.
global unique.
Global unique.
3 to
Yes.
24 characters.
3 to 24 characters, not below 3, not exceeding 24.
No
Anything
special
else?
characters.
No special characters.
Only lower cases
Only lower cases, exactly. No special
and
characters,
numbers.
only lower cases and numbers, correct. Only lower cases and numbers. No special characters, 3 to 24, unique in nature. This is the naming convention that you need to follow, and also globally unique. Yes, globally unique. You cannot have, let's say, a storage account that is taken by someone else out there. And let's say, sorry, let's say access tiers. let's talk about this hot and cool. When do you go for hot and when do you go for cool? In which case scenarios do you go for a hot access tier? In which case scenario you will be going for a cool scenario out here?
And
Frequent
storage is
access.
regularly accessed, it will
hmm
go for hot.
Frequently accessed storages
Yeah,
or
yeah.
frequently accessed blobs
Uh,
will be
blobs
in hot,
hot.
and infrequently, meaning something that you do not access on a daily basis, this is in cool. So I'll say non-frequently accessed. These are, let's say, the differentiation of that. But let's say if I were an interview, I'm asking you a real-time question, it's something like this. So I would say, you know what, I'm a company called A. So I'll give you a couple of, let's say, conditions out here for understanding how do we, let's say, get around with this one. I'll say my company is called something like Ola, and I have blobs that are being frequently accessed for the first 30 days. After this, the time period of the access is going down. After 30, the access is going down. So my intention is that for the first 30 days, I should have the blobs in hot. After or between 30 to 60, my blob should be in cool. And after 60 days or after 90 days, probably, it should be deleted.
Or
Then how
archive.
can I achieve this? Archive, yes, or archive, deleted or archival tier.
Lifecycle
Life
management.
management.
Lifecycle management. You have to, let's say, go through something called as lifecycle management rules, wherein you can configure multiple rules out here. You can have multiple rules in place, and you can tell in that rule that, you know what, if it's 660, if the life cycle is 60 to 30 to 60, please move it to cool, or after 90, please go ahead, delete it, or let's say archive this out. That brings me to another interesting question, is that what do you feel is the primary difference between a blob in cool state versus a blob in an archival state? A cool versus archive. Do you even have archive out here, and what happens to a blob in archive and versus what happens to it while in cool?
Archival won't be charged when it is in archival. Means blobs won't be charged.
Archive we can't read archival. But
We can't read archival. Yes, that's the one. Well, that's the one again. Archive is charged, but archive is charged at a very lower rate than what cool, let's say, really offers to you. Again, if you look at the pricing model of Azure, if I just say Azure price calculator, and if I just look at the pricing calculator or pricing model of Azure out here, and let me go, let's say, scroll down, delete these particular services out here, and if I just look at the storage account out here, and I'll save you, and if I, let's say, put this in, let's see, where is this LRS and all these things are. Okay. For some strange reason, it doesn't give me, let's say, the hot, cool, and all that stuff. Let's say standard. Yes. I'll say archival out. And if you look at the archive, the cost of storage, let's scroll down and let's also, let's say, convert the currency into INR. The cost of storage, what I incur, again, this is giving me an abnormally high number because I have a lot of services added out here, but this is not what I want to really see. I just want to see what is the storage cost for every 1000 GB. This is just 78 rupees for every 1000 GB out here versus 1000 some change for every 1000 GB when it is on hot. When it's in cool, the price reduces. When it's in archive, the price is least. But when a blob is in archive, you cannot access it, meaning you do not have a read-only permission. But let's say if you want to access it, what you need to do? An access,
Change the yeah.
change the
we need,
tier,
we need to rehydrate
exactly.
the data.
Rehydrate the data. That's the point, exactly. You need to rehydrate the data. meaning you need to change the tier from archive back into cool or hot to, let's say, go ahead and rehydrate this particular data out here. This is what you need to do when you want to, let's say, convert things out, or when you want to, let's say, access the blob that is, let's say, sitting in something known as an archival tier out here. This is what lifecycle management really talks about, and this is how you go ahead and, let's say, retrieve the data back again. Now, one of the most important areas, or one of the most favorite areas that an interviewer would like to ask when you are looking into a storage account service is about redundancy, or I would say in a very simple term, replications. And here I would like to, let's say, ask a couple of questions out here. Is that, let's look at this. How many tiers or how many replication models do you think is available in Azure?
6 or more.
6 types.
4.
6 types, which is LRS, GRS, ZRS, RAGRS, RAGZRS, all these things out here. But your primary question should to any interviewer should be like, what is the region that you're actually looking at? Very importantly, as an interviewer, this is what we would, let's say, love to ask you all, is that what kind of a replication model that is available in Azure? The answer here should be it completely depends upon the region that you're creating a storage service in. Not all the services or not all the regions will offer all the redundancies. Let's say I go to homepage and I want to create a storage account service. And if I choose a location like, let's say something like Australia Central, the available redundancies are what? LRS and the GRS only. You do not have something like ZRS. You do not have something like GZRS. You don't have all those categories out here. Not all the redundancy options are supported in all the regions. So very importantly, if I talk about how many redundancy models are available out there, depends on the region. Not all the Azure regions have redundancy, or not all the Azure regions have all the redundancies available out there. There are a few regions which do not support ZRS. There are a few regions that do not support GRS as well. There are a few regions, let's say something like this. Most importantly, if I create my account in premium, it makes matters even more worse. In a premium tier, I can only have LRS. I do not have the option of GRS, ZRS. All these things are vanished in a premium tier. So it depends upon the region and also the performance model of the storage account that you're selecting. It is only LRS when you have a premium storage account. You cannot have a GRS, you cannot have a ZRS, you do not have all these things out there. And if you are going for standard, yes, you get more options depending upon the region that you create this in. If let's say it's a region that is recommended, that's the reason there are two things out here. If you look at regions, right, there's something called recommended regions by Azure. There is something called other regions in Azure, that you know what, there are regions, but I won't recommend this out a lot. But if you put it in a recommended region, I have LRS, GRS, ZRS, and all these things out here that are coming up out here. So recommended regions support zone redundancy, meaning they have multiple data centers in the same region, in the same zone of the same region out there. So it completely depends upon what kind of, let's say, model that is available out there. Now, to confuse you as an interviewer, I would say, okay, fine, you know what? I understood that premium storage has only LRS, but I want a ZRS out here. So I am now trying to write a PowerShell to change my tier from premium to standard. Is this possible? Yes, no, maybe.
No.
No? Anyone? Yes, out there?
No.
Yes,
No.
sir.
Can we change this to premium, from premium to standard out there?
You need to create one storage account after migrate.
And then migrate, exactly. So you cannot convert a storage from premium to standard, not allowed. If you, I mean, there are a couple of things that are not allowed in storages. Firstly, the name of the storage account, you cannot change it after you create it. The location of the storage account, you cannot change it after you create it. And also the performance type of the storage account. These are the three things that you cannot go ahead and change this after you create it. So I'll have to, let's say, put a good amount of consideration before I actually go ahead and create a storage service out here. So before I go ahead and create the storage services out here, I need to go ahead and think a couple of things like what kind of a redundancy you offer, what kind of performance you offer, what kind of, let's say, the uh, let's say how far is it from my point of business and all these things out, and then go ahead and let's say select all these things out there. And let's say you have created storage in, let's say, GRS. So let's say you created storage in ECS2 with a standard tier, and let's say my replication right now is LRS right now, locally redundant storage. Now, my question as an interviewer is that, you know what, in a locally redundant storage, if my primary data center is not available, Azure will automatically convert my storage into ZRS. Is that a right statement to tell?
No.
Yes, no,
No.
maybe? No,
No.
exactly. It is no. Azure will not take this responsibility. You as a user has to, let's say, take this responsibility out here. Again, in a locally redundant storage, again, how do you read this? Just click on this link called redundancy. There is something called learn more. Click on learn more. You'll automatically get diverted into, let's say, the documentation of Azure. Here it is telling you that, you know what, locally redundant storage offers you 3 copies out here in the same data center. So if this data center is unavailable due to some reason, there is some issue that happened, something like that. If the data center is unavailable, your data will simply not be available. Your application can simply not, let's say, read this particular data. The data is not going to be available out here, for which Azure tells you that, you know what, please go to something like ZRS or GRS. And Azure also tells you in this documentation what are the regions that actually support ZRS, what do not support ZRS, and what supports and all these things out here. And it also talks about something called redundancy in the secondary region, on how do you, let's say, make sure that the data is available in the secondary region out here. Now my question for y'all is that, let's see this. You have created your storage account in RAGRS, read access geo redundant storage out here. So what really happens here in this model is that you have 3 copies available in the primary data center, let's say ECS2. You have 3 copies available in the secondary data center as well, which is, let's say, something like Central US. Secondary data center again is not in my control. Microsoft allocates this to me out here. Now my question for y'all is that the primary data center is not available, meaning there's something that happened in ECS not available out here. Now my question is that in this model, will Azure automatically switch your traffic to the secondary data center out here? Yes,
No.
no, maybe?
No. We need to give that.
No.
Azure gives.
Sorry, can you please come again?
Azure do not access.
Azure don't access. Okay, anyone else?
We need to ask Microsoft team to change that connections to another copy.
Yes. So no, we need to. So yes, we need to, let's say, raise a ticket to get another. Yes, you need to ask Microsoft to, let's say, go ahead and raise this one. Not really. You don't really need to ask Microsoft for that. What you can do is this. Now, as of now, my storage account is in, let's say, LRS. I'll change this to GRS, going into the configuration of the, I mean, settings and the configuration of the storage account. I'll change this one to, let's say, something like RAGRS. I'll save this out. And now it's updating my storage account. Can take around 5 or 6 minutes for this particular storage account to get updated. What this does is that, firstly, this gives you 2 different regions out here. Primary as in East US, secondary is in West US. So secondary region is not in my control. I just told what my primary region is. I created as this particular storage account in East US out here, and Azure automatically said that I'll give you a secondary region out here. Now my question was that, if I, or if the secondary or if the primary region fails out here for some reason, Probably there is some natural calamity or something happened in the data center. The data center is not responding back, so your data is not available. What Microsoft tells you is that in this case, you as a customer can initiate something called as a failover. Your connections will change. Primary will move into secondary, secondary will go into primary. How do you do that? Just scroll down. There is something called data management geo replication. Right now it's telling failover cannot be initiated right now. Reason being, I just changed the tier. It will take some time for me to, let's say, sync the data. The time here is around 30 minutes or something like that for Azure to go ahead and sync this data. Once that is done, do you see now there is something called primary and there is something called secondary. And when I hit this button, once this button is available, there is a button called prepare for failover. Once I hit this button, Azure will change the data sets available out here. My secondary region will become primary. Primary will become my secondary, so that my business can continue to work without me, let's say, having a data loss. My business can start continue to work. This is called as a concept of failover. And Microsoft has done some very good documentation around it, which I'll also show you on what do you mean by something called failover. I'll say storage account, failover, Azure. And this is what it is telling you is that disaster recovery and storage failover out here. It tells you what kind of durability you have, how can you, let's say, fail over your region, what you can kind of do out here and all these things out here. I would want you all to go through this particular documentation on what is a failover concept, what are the limitations to a failover concept, when should you initiate a failover, what kind of a situation do you want to, let's say, go for a failover, how much time it will take you for, for going a failover and all these things out here. This is what Microsoft really tells, and when let's say something called as a failover out here. So you do not really need to come with a ticket. All you need to come into the Azure portal, go into the storage account, go into something called data management, under which you have something called geo replication, and you can hit on the prepare failover button out here. This is what you can do when you come down to a storage account as such.
After
Yes,
doing
any question?
configuration, we need to do
Hmm?
this, right? Geo replication.
Correct. After this is done, so now Microsoft, what in the background is doing is that what I did is I just changed myself from LRS to GRS or LRS to RAGRS. So whatever the data is there in my primary data center, Microsoft is trying to replicate all the data in the secondary data center, which is an asynchronous replication. So once that is done, Microsoft will automatically, give you a notification telling that your failover is now available, and you can hit this something called prepare for failover, and that will make sure that your primary becomes secondary and secondary becomes primary out there.
So the data is not failover. We can change it to secondary to first primary. Primary.
The data is not failover, as in like you cannot do that. You cannot, let's say,